always keep in mind you are creating an assistant for choices. Don't know whether there's a term for that, but I'm using it anyway. I call it the portal architect.
Hi, you're listening to Conversations, a podcast by the Power Pages community where you learn about how other professionals deliver Power Pages solutions out in the field. My name is Tino Rabe, and I had the chance to talk with this week's guest, Konstantin Adenauer from Berlin. Enjoy the show.
Hey,
How are you doing today?
Just fine.
Great.
Fine. Thank you.
Great to have you on the show. You're the first one. You're my guinea pig.
Yes.
But I couldn't think of anyone better than you. Yeah. You're a happy, smiling guy, so I'm very looking forward to this conversation.
Yes.
So, conversation, that's the topic, that's the name of the game.
The name of the game.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I invite you to share your wisdom, your knowledge, your battle scars and bloody noses that you got over those years, delivering Power Pages solutions. And hopefully out of this exchange, people can drag some valuable information for their Power Pages solutions and project that they are in. I wish I would have had someone or some resource to listen to when I started out back in 2016, or maybe just along the way until now, to get the second opinion on things and maybe some exchanges of information and best practices. So yeah, I hope that's something that the audience can take out of this show.
Of course.
Tell me about yourself. What are you currently doing?
What I'm currently doing, a consultant at Adesso SE with a focus on customer experience in the domain of Microsoft Dynamics 365. And in addition, I'm specialized on Power Pages.
Nice.
For those who don't know Power Pages, it is AKA portals, AKA Power Apps portals, or back in the days, ADX Studio.
Okay, so you're working for Adesso in Germany,
Yes.
I guess?
Yes, in Germany, in Berlin. This is where I'm located. But as you may guess, the clients are all over Germany. So in that regard, it really depends where the client is
Yeah.
and where you need to travel to.
Sure. And what was your kickoff, your start?
My kickoff, back in 2017, I changed my job. So I came from Vienna to Frankfurt and started in a small consultancy with a focus on on the automotive industry. And in the beginning, I was told that they used to work on a standard in the information security. And for that regard, we needed to, create some kind of CRM system in order to handle the data. And in that time, it was my job to figure out which would have been the best CRM. So we thought about Sugar as well as Microsoft Dynamics. Well, at that time, I had no idea, not at all, about these products. So I needed to evaluate these systems from different points of view. So from an information security point of view, from the point of view how many CRM users, of course, from a point of view of costs, yearly cost, and so on, and of course the development part. So after a few months, we decided to get Microsoft Dynamics. I think back in the days, we took the sales module, so the base of the Dynamics 365. And in addition, we needed a portal in order to establish these B2B processes. So to connect with those people, those companies who needed to get an assessment. And so in the pilot phase, we basically had, well, paper registration. So I think it was a pile of 20 pages. And in order to register themselves, they needed to fill out these papers and send us via email or fax.
Oh, via fax.
So we
That's
would
a very
put these
German solution.
Yes, yeah, well, it was a pilot, the first
Yeah,
50.
sure.
So then I needed to figure out, so how could this registration process look on a portal digitally? So I started out drawing processes and ideas. And well, then we had the system launched. It was not live yet. We had a provider who helped us developing the system, basically, the CRM as well as the portal. However, even they weren't so in depth with these systems. So after a few months, we launched, and we figured that we could do it by ourselves, which we did. So at the end of the day, we had been 3 to 4 people who constantly worked on the portal as well as on the CRM. So when we went into depth, how could we optimize the user interface? How could we guide the portal user? How could we send out automatic emails? How could we make that system, the portal, as good as possible? We looked for answers. We asked questions on different forums on the internet. But back in the days, as you may know, there was not so much documentary about it. So it was trial and error, really. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you ended up with, well, it was still ADX Studio, or was it already Microsoft Portals?
I think it was in the merge.
In the merge. So,
I still remember the ADX Studio logo, and they had even a page with some knowledge about the portal. But I think they closed it in 2018, 2019. This was basically my first aid, this web page where I went to figure out my problems, to figure out solutions, to look for solutions. And well, one day the page wasn't reachable anymore. I was like, are you kidding me? Really?
Yeah.
Come on.
I totally feel you on this one. I don't know how many hours I spent in the curriculum and in the documentation, which is now more or less translated into Microsoft Learn. But I spent hours and days to figure stuff out. Yeah.
Yes.
So I can totally relate to what you're saying. This was also my number one resource to go to.
Yes. And also what they had back in the days, they had this configurator where you were able to configure your Bootstrap.
Yeah.
So you were able to see exactly what you were doing, and at the end of the day, you were able to download that file and upload it as a web file into your portal, and you were able to see the changes right away. But even that page was not reachable after a few years. So I was like, come on, really?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we are still at Bootstrap version 3 dot something, but big changes are coming
Yes.
next month. I think is public preview for the migration to Bootstrap 5. So
Yes.
big changes.
I'm a little bit scared.
How come?
Well, we are working on a few projects right now, and they're all using Bootstrap 3.5. And when a change like that happens, it is always work. It is always something to look after. And, well, you never know. So,
Yeah, of course, we all have automated testing in place 100%. So it's just with a push of a button we can see
of course,
what breaks. Yeah,
of course.
it's that easy.
You
in the
mean,
wild.
I mean, they even Microsoft, they did a change in the user interface code in the Portal version last December,
Okay.
in the winter of 2022. Or from one day after another, they, for some reason, upgraded the Portal version,
Hmm.
which led to a massive user interface problem.
Oh dear.
And that occurred on a few productive system of our clients. And as you may guess, they weren't really happy about that.
No.
However, Microsoft fixed that within 2 hours, so
Okay.
that was quite
Yeah.
good actually.
So it's
Yes,
it's not cool, but it's not the end of the world. So
yes.
some rough sea to sail through, but you managed it. It was an
That's one way to
interesting
put it.
morning, probably. Didn't need any coffee.
No, I was awake. Trust
Yeah.
me.
Okay, cool. So, and since then, I guess you have a focus on Power Pages then within Adesso. So you
Yes.
mainly deliver Power Pages projects now?
Yes, that's currently my focus. I'm trying to teach some of our colleagues how it works.
Hmm.
So the idea is to scale that product up in order to, well, to serve our clients with that product.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yes, of course I'm doing some CRM work, customization as well, but most of my projects, well, all of my projects are portal projects.
Hmm.
Yes.
So, if I understood correctly, you're in the role of, like, say, a business developer, yeah, to grow the business of Power Pages within Adesso. So,
Well, I think you can use many words. Um, let me put it this way. My knowledge uh, within that subject um, is quite depth. So there are not so many other colleagues who understand that product so good. But
yeah.
my goal is it to scale it up. My goal is it to form a team to well to develop that product basically. So
Okay.
you can call it a business developer, but I think there's more to it. There's a consulting part to it. There's the technical part to it. There's the implementation part to it. There's the coding part to it.
All
So
right.
besides, consulting our clients, which way we need to go and what we need to consider,
Mm-hmm.
and how other products of the Microsoft Power Platform may be useful in that regard, I'm also writing code like Liquid or in some regard jQuery, JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hands-on.
So you're basically like what when I speak to customers, like a full stack Power Page developer. Yeah, you know how to customize a form in the schema, and you know how to bring it to life, and
Yes.
maybe even a bit further. Yeah, like querying data in web
Yes.
templates via Liquid, and
Yes.
and then when you're in the browser, do some dynamic stuff with JavaScript and so on. Yeah, so a full
Yes.
stack Power Page developer.
Well, I have a different term for that.
Yeah.
I don't know whether there's a term for that, but I'm using it anyway. I call it the portal architect.
Okay.
Well, you got architects for the CRM, which is absolutely fine and totally
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. But why couldn't there be a portal architect?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Because from the experience I have so far, um, you need to consider right in the beginning how you're going to build it up in terms of how many portal languages are selectable in the portal.
Exactly.
Therefore, you need to consider, do I need content snippets in different languages?
Yeah.
How do I use code multiple times? Let's say you have a fetch XML, a query, you want to display a specific type of data, but not just on one page, maybe on 2 pages. So why don't you use a web template as a code component and use it wherever you want?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so before we even create a portal, we often ask the client, so what's your idea? Where do you want to go in the next 2, 4, 5 years? Are we only using the German language, or maybe you expand in other countries, for example, in England? So is there a
Yeah.
chance in 2 or 3 years we might implement English? So if you consider that, we need to consider how we build up the portal right away from the beginning. Otherwise, we need to rework everything, which is lots of work and unnecessary.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I second what you just said. I've been involved in projects where even the content differs across the languages. Yeah, the
Oh,
best example, especially for German companies, if you have like Chinese users, they might not be able to see everything because of some concerns of
yes.
of the German customer, I would say. So that maybe, if you, best example, you're working with opportunities. Well,
Yes.
and let's say they have subsidiaries in Germany, in France, and Austria, and they all look the same. Of course, they're located or localized, but for the Chinese colleagues, maybe some of the amount fields or calculation fields are not displayed in the same manner. Let's say it like that.
Yes.
So, absolutely. So know your personas. Yeah, who's
Yes.
working with your portal, what they want to achieve, of course,
Yes.
and then tailor around, let's say, a user journey. Yeah, and
Yes.
right from the get go, that's what I always like to do in the beginning of a project. Shape out the solution on paper first, which also
Yes.
might include wireframes, yeah, so
Yes.
that you get an idea. And I even call this the MVP, although
Mhm.
it's not really clickable. I mean, you
Yes.
can use tools to make it clickable, like, I don't know, Figma, Adobe XD, even Balsamic, yeah.
Yes.
But it's really the MVP, which is ugly, which is a scribble, but it's working. And then maybe you derive the MLP, the minimum lovable product, yeah, which is maybe already configured, but not really having the dynamic business logic in it. So yeah,
Exactly.
but coming
And
back to your point, Portal's
yes.
architect, absolutely, I'll second that. And it's a discipline, it's a skill set that has been, I would say, evolved over the last years in Dynamics, which has specific rules. It's called the solution architect, I would say.
Yes.
And as Power Pages gain more traction, more speed in the wild now, I think this
Yes.
becomes a valid role.
It will. It will. Since October last year, 2022, Microsoft has changed the game in terms of more documentation. They pushed that product out of the Power Apps part into the entire Power Platform, making
Yeah,
it the fifth, I don't know, the fifth product of the entire Power
the
Platform.
fifth
And there,
child.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And therefore, it gains more attention
Yeah,
from the development point of view, even from the customer point of view. So nowadays, we have clients who specifically ask for Power Pages and not just for portals. So what that means they have done some research in terms of what is this product? How could it help me? How could it help us in terms of a business point of view? And that means that Microsoft is so far in terms of how can we make a product accessible and understandable for our clients or for our end clients. And so far, I think they've done a really good job.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So you also experience that there's more demand in the German
Yes.
market right now, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. It makes sense. It's a product in the Microsoft world. Lots of businesses use Microsoft as their core solution in terms of email communication, Teams, or maybe or also SharePoint, or even a CRM. So when they think about, let's say, a shop, an online shop, or a page where their users, their customers need to interact with something, it is the next, it's basically it's the solution for that.
Yeah.
So you can reduce your own support for your own clients. You give them their data and they can interact with it. So you
Yeah.
don't need to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think really the biggest the biggest selling point is that you make strangers part of your organization, yeah, part of your business process, although they are not in your organization. They don't have
Yes,
the Microsoft 365 account. They don't work in your system. Still, they heavily participate in
yes,
your processes and drive value
yes,
for themselves and of course for you, hopefully. Yeah.
yes.
And that's a huge lever, yeah,
Mm.
because you can scale your process, or potentially you could scale your processes up by a great factor. Yeah.
Yes,
Of course, it
definitely.
comes with a cost. Yeah. So it's not all glory and gold, but at the end of the day, it's a professional service, and
It
if the
is.
business case is working out, phew, go
And
to the
that's the
moon.
point. And that's the point. There are countless business cases you can adapt to Power Pages. I'm often asked, so what's the main business case? It's not just self-service. It's not just ticketing or support system or cases. Um, I had I had projects like the very first one was even the most complicated one.
Mm-hmm.
It was based in the it was based in the automotive industry, and it was a platform. The portal was used as a platform to exchange information security assessments
Mm-hmm.
between specific companies.
Yeah.
So you would have an assessment, um, and then the company who would own that assessment and the can then basically choose to whom it would send it to via that platform,
Yeah.
via that portal. On the other hand, I have projects where um, you have a company in the public sector and they have a registration process for their members to become a member or for people who would like to become a member. So basically, you fill out a few pages with your name, your address, and whatever you need to give.
Mm-hmm.
And then within seconds, they can choose whether they accept you as a member or not. Or on the other hand, we had a project where companies in the energy sector needed to submit their yearly, how do you call that? Their yearly gas and water. Um,
Ja. Gas- und Wasserabrechnung oder sowas?
yes,
Yeah. So like their yearly consumption report or something.
exactly. Basic. Yes, exactly. And back in the days, they needed to do it via paper, and then they need to send it via email or via fax. And so whenever you have a customer who needs to change something, who needs who basically needs your attention in order to give you something, most of the time information, you can use a portal being a bridge in that regard.
Yeah.
And what I found out in the last 7 years that the user itself is dumb. Most of the users.
Okay.
Well, that's my point. That's my experience.
Oh,
Um,
that's a bold statement. Can you elaborate on that?
yes, it is a bold statement. Yes, I think we are spoiled nowadays. We have so many applications. We have so many user interfaces, and we are used to things which work. So you see a button, you don't read text anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
the human eye is much more faster in recognizing symbols instead of reading text. And even if the paragraph has just 3 lines, you wouldn't really dare. You just press continue.
Mm-hmm.
So when we started the first portal in the information security field, you may guess we had lots of text on each form. And
Yeah.
trust me, nobody really read it
Mm-hmm.
because they were lazy. Well, I wouldn't read it on my own. So they called us.
Okay.
by asking whether we could help them, assist them through that process.
Oh,
Although our intention was that they would do it on themselves.
yeah.
So that didn't work out. So our phones rang all the time. So, we needed to change that. So we reduced the amount of text on each form
Mm-hmm.
and created a landing page right before the registration would start by
Okay.
saying, on the next 6 pages, you're about to fill in this data. You need to consider this. If you're not ready, please come back sometime later. And then we figured that's not the end of the day. So we started to create an FAQ.
Mm-hmm.
And we started sending out automatic emails even within the process. So let's say that that person on the third page would basically just stop the application and would like to come back on the next day. We would send him or her an automatic email with the link and with some additional text and information and links to FAQs. So we gave them information. What we didn't give them all at once.
Yeah.
We gave them small pieces, chunks, small snacks
Mm-hmm.
to consume, but not too much at once.
Okay.
And that really led to a very smooth process. They didn't really call us anymore. They had no questions because we provided them enough information exactly at that point when they asked for it. So we really narrowed down what is the information on the first page, what is the information on the second, on the third, on the fourth page.
Yeah.
And based on how we designed the forms, we gathered the information together and sent them towards the applicant. And
I
that
see.
really led to well, quite a days. No phone, no phone calls.
No, no phone calls anymore. Just people
Yes,
actually using the product, the
yes.
solution.
So in that regard, I always say that the user is lazy, although it's really a really bold statement. But you could have the best application in terms of its functionality. But if it doesn't speak to the user, if the user interface doesn't give you a chance to interact,
Yeah.
if you don't see what you like, you wouldn't use it. But there are applications out there which use the minimalistic, but they look nice. So we tend to use them, although the functionality is not really great,
Mm-hmm.
but they work and they are easy.
Totally, totally.
Yes.
I mean, there's always one question I'd like to ask in the beginning of a project to my customers, like, what's in it for your users? Why should they use it?
Oh,
Because
yes.
what
Yes.
what I often experience, like, they have a rich set of requirements and what people should do, but it just work for the user. Yeah, it's like, of course you have this great chance to put them into your processes and contribute to your processes,
Yes.
but if there's no value in for the customer or for the Power Pages user itself, then I would say it's probably not the right focus. Yeah,
Yes.
then it from my experience, then it tends to be some very overcomplicated, over-engineered 110% solution where each fragment of this of or each incarnation of the business process needs to be handled.
Mhm.
Still though, like, they really need, I don't know, 60 or 80% of the process which really delivers the critical value. And then
Yes.
my one might to think about, okay, how can we make this sexy? How can we make this valuable to
Yes.
the user? Yeah, so that there's actually some component in that makes it attractive to use. So I think that's very crucial
I
to
would
ask this in the
I
beginning.
would go one step further. I totally agree with what you just said, but I would go one step further. Um, I often try to um, well to use the term decision-making assistant.
Mm-hmm.
All the electronic devices, all the tools we need, they basically help us in our decisions.
Yeah.
So you need to ask, what is the decision to make? What does, well, what is the focus of the user in the portal. What is the decision he or she needs to make in order for you to get the value out of it?
Mm-hmm.
And with that term, I often create some kind of question marks
Yeah.
at my clients. Although they or we use these products every day, why do you use WhatsApp? It helps you in the decision to connect with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you use, I don't know, Outlook or some other products? Or let's say, why use digital applications for stock trading? It
Mm-hmm.
helps you with the decision to probably buy more stocks.
Yeah.
So when you have a portal, when you have a product you want to place on the portal, when you have processes, make it as simple as possible, which is really difficult, which is really difficult. But they need to make a decision, and you should give them the most easiest way in order to make it the most, let's say, easiest way is such a lame, lame expression.
Yeah, but I think I totally get this. Yeah. And I heavily agree. I think one key value is, if you wouldn't have the possibility to look at, so let's say I'm using a self-service portal
Yes,
out in the wild with my telecom provider. Yeah. I would have the chance to see my data, my invoices. I don't need to call someone. I don't
yes,
need to email in and wait for a response. So it's democratizing me
yes,
with all the relations with this company. And
yes,
this is such a huge lever for me
yes,
personally, because
exactly.
I might look at an invoice at, I don't know, 11 o'clock in at night, yeah, and
Yes,
nobody's available. So that's a huge lever. But what
yes,
but what I sometimes experience, like the customer who wants to have a Power Pages solution, they might have a somewhat complicated process where, I
yes,
don't know, they want to onboard a new customer, and the customer needs to fill out an Excel sheet. Yeah. And what they then basically say is, okay, this work is quite heavy in terms of resource labor. Let's make this Excel sheet, let's translate it to a Power Pages solution. And I
yes,
would say, yeah, but why? What's the value for the customer in it to crunch in the numbers, not into an Excel sheet, but into a form? It doesn't really make sense. Yeah. So that's you. What I could give out to the audience listening is really reflect always on the value for the customer, and of
yes.
course, um, for your client. Yeah. So at the end of the day, he's the one
I,
paying.
I mean, one of the main values using Power Pages is the user is able to interact with their own data. However, they are not depending on your working hours.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to wait until the office opens in order to call you. If the process is easy enough,
Sure.
they can do it on their own. They don't even need to be in the same time zone. And there's this this is really good example. Um, I always give to my clients when we talk about portals. Before I tell you the the example, there are three points how I define Power Pages, and they're quite simple. The first
Okay.
is it's the second user interface on your Dataverse for
100%. I just
internal.
had this conversation today.
Yes,
Portals. So the first one is, you have to think of Power Pages, but nothing then another interface like Dynamics. It's just a view on the
exactly.
database.
But for internal as well as for external users. So
Sure.
for users who are not in your domain. The second definition point, the second point is that you can mirror every record, every table from your Dataverse on the portal. Every.
Hmm.
And the third definition is with the right, how do you say, right management system. Oh, no, that's not right expression. What's the right expression for?
Yeah, the security model.
Yeah, the security within the security method, you decide which portal user is able to see which web page, as well as how they are able to interact with your records, with your tables. So with these three definitions, you can narrow it down to every use case you have. And before we start a portal project with our clients, I often tell them most of them use a portal every day. If you book a train ticket at Deutsche Bahn, it is basically the same. Deutsche Bahn has reduced their support, the customer support. So you are able to interact with the system, with the data in the system. You are able to create your own account with your email address, with your password. You can define your invoice address, your home address. You can define your Bahncard 25, 50, 100. And you are also able to book tickets online. You don't need to call them. You don't need to go to the counter and ask for a trip from Munich to Berlin. So it's a perfect example of a self-service. Of course, one would say to optimize it, there's much potential to make it even better. Yes, but what we see so far is that if we go back to the definition points, the external user is able to interact with specific records from the database and with specific permissions.
Yeah.
And that process of booking a ticket is made so easy that most of the times, I don't know the numbers, but I guess less than 5% need to call the support of Deutsche Bahn in order to help them out.
Yeah, it becomes native. Yeah, so
Yes.
this customer interaction becomes native. Absolutely, and we are used to this. I mean, we are children of the internet. Yeah, we've been
Yes,
using the internet for, I don't know, 20 years now at
quite some
least.
time.
Yeah, so it's just native. Yeah, if I have a question, I first ask Google and not some
Yes.
real person. Usually, except my wife, maybe, but
I think
yeah.
I think you wouldn't find power pages in the books, so
No, that's true. I mean, there are books out there, or there have been with Power Apps portals, but yeah, it's changing so fast, so fast.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So tonight, would you like to talk about a specific solution that you have delivered, or we could also just briefly talk about how you do uh, solutions nowadays?
Yes, nowadays.
Yeah, cool.
I can do that. So most of the times when we develop a project, it's we are basically three person within the portal project.
Okay.
So you got one for the user interface, working on CSS, HTML, and a little bit of jQuery to make everything look beautiful and nice,
Okay.
and to follow the CI of the company, of the client. And on the other hand, we would have an architect in the CRM, and then a portal architect. You could also have another person in terms of requirements engineering, or maybe a project lead, or maybe a scrum master. But if you have the right people, you can do it with three people. Depending, of course, depending on the size of the project, depending on the time frame, depending on the budget, of course. Um, yes, and I often start with what's the name of the portal?
Oh,
What is
that's a good
what's the
question.
what is the URL of the portal?
Yeah.
What is the URL of the development, of the test, of the productive system? Um, do we use local authentication or do we use external authentication? If
Yeah.
we use external, do we use LinkedIn or Twitter or Microsoft?
hmm
Um, what is the browser title suffix?
Yeah.
How strong should
Totally.
the password policy be?
Mm.
Um, then shall we force the portal user to fill out at least once the profile in order to create a golden record?
Yeah.
But I also tell my clients the profile is the last piece of the puzzle. We finish the profile at the very end before
Oh,
we
really?
go live. Yes, yes.
Okay, so then probably you will never direct the portal user after login to the profile page then.
Well, I mean, when we go live, the profile page is done, it's
Yeah.
finished. But I figured from experience that besides the authentication process, the registration, you probably have more technical as well as business processes on the portal.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you have um, event management. So people are able to register for specific events, but they are also able to register, I don't know, for renting something.
Mm-hmm.
But all these processes need most of the times an invoice address.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you ask for an invoice address in the profile?
Sure.
So I try to figure out all the necessary fields within the process that that the users only needs to put in once. And then metadata. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say we come to an event page where he or she needs to fill in an invoice address, which could differ. I use metadata in order to pull out the data from the CRM, from the user's record, and autofill them within the fields.
Okay.
So I assist the user with a
Mm-hmm.
decision whether to use its own invoice address given from his profile or to change it to a different one.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
that
that's the reason why I
that's
tell the clients, let's do the profile at the very end.
so I understand you have a heavy focus on making the system your best assistant. Yeah, if you're the logged-in user, the system is your assistant. And I
Yes.
really like the idea. I have not really thought about it in the past, but as we're speaking about it, I can totally relate to this. Yeah. So make it as easy, as frictionless as possible. Put in as much data as possible so that you can draw the smallest decision possible. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is
Yes.
probably the most crucial decision for you as a company.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool. I
And
really like
I
that.
even go one step further. I try to reduce the amount of information, the amount of input fields
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible. So I often use Liquid or jQuery JavaScript
Mm-hmm.
and try to hide most of the fields on the form. And when the user puts in data, let's say on the first two or three fields,
Yeah.
depending on the value of the data, more fields appear. But in the beginning, they're all invisible.
Mm-hmm.
So the user is not scared about filling out 20 input fields because it's work. He needs to think.
Yeah.
But if you give them snacks, one snack after another, if you
Yeah.
reduce the amount of information on one page, if you even create a web form with, let's say, 6 pages, and on each page you only have 4 or 5 or 6 input fields,
Yeah.
the user tend to fill out everything much more faster because he or she doesn't see 30 input fields at once.
Yeah, would be overwhelmed totally. I mean, I would
Exactly.
be overwhelmed if I would see,
Yes.
okay, I might have a small topic right now, yeah, and in order to proceed, I could definitely see that there's work for, I don't know, 20 or 30 fields. I might conclude I shall cancel my
I
initial
mean,
request.
if you go to a doctor and you don't, well, most of the times, if it's not a checkup, you go to the doctor because you don't feel good.
Yeah.
And then you come into you say hello at the counter and they give you a piece of paper, kind of a form, and say, please fill it out before you see the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's most of the times the same information.
Yeah.
It's my name, probably my insurance number. It's do I smoke? Do I drink? What are my habits? It's like, why do I need to fill it out every time? And often it's a
Mm-hmm.
two-pager.
Yeah.
And then they
Oh,
tell you,
yeah.
oh, you forgot to sign. You forgot something to put in. It's like, really? Come on. And
Yeah.
you can
And then,
reduce it.
in German we have this saying. I don't know if it's proper in English, but we have like a salami tactic, yeah, where you
Yes.
cut the salami in slices and you give it piece by piece. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think that's a nice figure of speech here to
Yes.
understand what we're talking about. Okay, cool. So let's say you start a new exciting project with a new
Yes.
with a new client, and you have probably the first meeting, and they overwhelm you with a bazillion of requirements. Very confused, not related. So how do you actually tackle the requirements the requirements gathering process for your Power Pages solution? How
I
does this work?
I park them on the side. First of all, I've prepared a presentation which I often use. It's about 60 to 90 minutes. And before they tell me what they actually need, well, of course, we know what they need, otherwise, we wouldn't be in the room with them. But
Yeah.
before they tell me all the details, I first of all explain them the portal itself.
Okay.
Why? Because then I give them the possibility to speak the same language as I do or as we do.
Okay.
So using the same language um, avoids fearness. If you don't
Sure.
understand something, you you tend not to work with it. But if you make it accessible for the human, if you make it easy to understand, you tend to use it much more. I mean, the best example is the the first iMac. Back in the days when the first colorful iMac came out, they installed a handle at the back.
Yeah.
The handle wasn't really for, carrying the iMac. It was much more the idea of a human could interact, like touch that
Touch it.
iMac.
Actually, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So, with that idea in mind, I try to explain the the client all the buzzwords, all the technical meanings, and I often give them um, kind of a how do you say a kind of a handbook with all the terms we use, so they
So
understand
how
the
yeah?
language we use.
And how far do you go into this rabbit hole? I mean, are you really going all the way and explain them? And this it all comes down to the web template where we
No,
define
no,
stuff.
no. Well,
No, okay, that's too deep into the
we,
rabbit hole.
we often start with the name of the portal. Then we start with the URLs. So we basically ask for the basic information for the portal. Then we ask, do we need to have only one language or two languages or three languages? Based on that
Okay.
answer, we drive a different strategy in terms of technical implementation. Then we go for a few security parts. Let's say page not found page or access denied page. Let's say a
Yeah,
user
okay.
accesses a page, but he does not have the rights to see that page. What should he or she read or being redirected? The authentication process. We need a queue, like an email address, like reply at something.
Yeah.
So the portal, or basically the database, communicates via email with the customer, with the client, with the end client during the authentication process. So we need that one. We need an email template for the email confirmed email body. We need
Yeah.
an email template for reset your password or change your email address.
Yeah.
So when we ask the client for this information, they even think about how to communicate with the client, with their clients.
Yeah.
Do they use a serious language? Do they use an easy language? How are they layouting the emails for these processes? And then we ask them for the authentication process. So in terms of security, the email, the password policy, how many characters, small, big characters, numbers, specific characters, allowed or not allowed. And when they ask for external authentication, we probably have a second session and ask, okay, which should we use? Should we use Azure B2C as a single sign-on? Should we use LinkedIn or Twitter? Do you know your customers so good in order to use LinkedIn as an authentication provider? Let's say your clients, most of them are, working somewhere, so they're in the business world, most of them probably have a LinkedIn account. So it's much more easier for them to use that external authentication provider to gain access to your portal. So then I asked whether we need to have search functionality. I asked the client if we have more than one language. If so, should the language code visible in the URL or not? Should the language be selectable by the user? And if so, do we use full written words, let's say English or German, or do we use short like EN or DE? So with that information that meeting tends to be a massive dialogue. So it's a discussion, but I've give them enough to tell me where they want to go, and afterwards we talk about the further processes, because the first 90 minutes in that regard gives the proper base, the foundation of the entire portal. So you got the name, you got the authentication process, you got a few emails.
You can invite people. People can access in their language under a nice URL that they can understand, which is visible.
So then the customer journey can start, and so you start actually at the point when the user has saved their profile for the very first time.
Yeah, and I mean all these artifacts that you just described, they're really obligatory. If you don't use them, no one can log in. No one can read, because it's not in their language. So, or even not access because it's some cryptic URL by Microsoft or so. And what I really like about this approach is it's repeatable, I mean, it can be standardized even. And I remember I read it some time ago on the webpage of Engineered Code, the company run by Nicholas Haydu. And I think it says somewhere on the webpage, or used to say maybe, we have a 200 plus questionnaire, or a question of 200 plus questions, where we handle a Power Pages project in a standard way by conducting those interviews with those questions. And I see a lot of value in it, but still,
I mean, you can even
for the obligatory part, because at some point it becomes individual, because you want to contribute to individual business processes. So how do you continue on the stuff that is not standard?
Well, before I go into that, I mean, you could actually create a portal, a Power Pages with these questionnaires and ask your client to fill them out before the very first meeting. And then you tell them, by the way, you just use the very product you want to implement in the future. That would be something, wouldn't
it? That's a nice idea. That's a very nice product idea, actually.
If you make that questionnaire very simple, first of all, they register. So you have your client's data. They go through your web form with, let's say, 6-7 pages with different entities. You all link them up. So it's basically a customer journey, which helps you to understand your client's need. And then when you have the very first meeting, You basically just open the CRM or even the portal from a different point of view with a different REPL and tell them, by the way, this is how we see you. And you just use the product you want to give to your clients. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
coming back to your question is, I don't know whether you're familiar with the tool Miro. Miro.
Yeah, Miro boards.
Yeah.
I'm using Miro boards as well. Yeah.
Yes, I'm using Miro boards as well because it's a very easy and interactive way to visualize forms and data. So
Yeah.
let's say we have a client and they have a registration process for specific events. Even if it's only a one pager or two pager, I start creating mockups on Miro. Let's
Yeah,
say,
like
where do we put the
wireframes.
title? Exactly. Where do we put the
Yeah,
title
okay.
of the event? What information do they need to put in? Is it a required field? Is it a dynamic required field? Where should the user be led after they saved? Do they have a success message by saying you have been successfully registered to this event? Or do you lead them back to an overview page where they see all their own registration? You know, do you send them an automatic email by saying, yes, you are registered. By the way, here's your QR code. So yes, this is where it starts.
Okay, so you have this. So you're working in Miro boards where you have basically wireframe sketches to give a first idea of how things are structured in a
Yes,
very low fidelity way. And
exactly.
then earlier you said that you typically work with a UX designer as part of your
Yes,
regular project team. So
yes.
would that then, or could I assume that then you pass this over and say, okay, these are sketches. It's not even low fidelity. Um, Please make something beautiful out of it.
Um, no, not really. I
Okay.
often ask the client for their CI or CD, corporate design, for example. Most of them work with a agency, so they hand out the data, the headlines, the font, the colors, the primary colors, the secondary colors. And
Yeah.
if they ask us, we need a portal within our own website, we basically just need to, follow the rules how their first website is built. And most of the user interface designer I work with, they get it quite fast.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So then the customer gets a real idea of how things will look like and how it feel, how the click path is, the user journeys, and so
Exactly.
on.
Because I tell the client that we making it beautiful is one of the last processes. Because in the beginning we should focus on the functional part.
Yeah.
Because if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
follow a user story, you don't talk about design. You talk about
No, it's about
Peter
delivering
who needs to
value.
fill out a registration form, what kind of information do they need to provide, what happens afterwards, when is the process finished. But you don't talk
Yeah.
about colors, blue, yellow, orange. This is how you see it. But before you see it, you need to make it work. And this is what I tell my clients. So don't focus on how it looks, focus on the process, focus on the information you see in the CRM. Once we've agreed on all terms, once we have translated, developed all your needs, then we go into the third or fourth phase where we make it beautiful.
I see. Okay.
Hey, I mean, it's much more
Cool.
easier. Well,
Yeah, yeah, and I think it also puts you in a nice position where you deliver the critical value of implementation, really, right?
yes.
Because if you deliver this and make it work, yeah, it will deliver this crucial value to your client, and then it can always look better, yeah. There's not the perfect solution, but yeah, the function or functionality wise, it will probably be the same.
I
So
mean, there's this expression is called form follows function. So
yeah,
if you take that idea for Power Pages, the functionality is the first. the very first idea, the very first you need to accomplish. And then the form, the feel, how it looks, how it works is the second part, the secondary. Yes.
Cool, cool. Okay, okay. So now you've got it all worked out, the concept.
Most of the time.
It's visual. Yeah, most of the time. You know, it's somewhat visual in the Miro
Yes.
board. So the idea,
Yes. Yes.
the client already gets an idea. Now it says, okay,
Yes.
right, let's go, let's start. So I I would assume you don't start with a specific template. You just go with a
No.
blank,
Blank. Always. I don't
always
really
blank,
like the
right?
templates. No, because
Okay,
I don't like the pre-written code.
okay,
Um, I like to have a fresh blank page.
okay, okay. So then, what's your style of implementation? Do you prefer to? I mean, I always see two ways. You take the standard, like exposing a list, and then from a list you go to a form and so on, and
Yes.
you use these principles to the most exhaustive way you can until
Yes.
you hit the ceiling. Yeah, and then you say, okay, we maybe tweak this a little, yeah, with some
Yes.
JavaScript maybe, or probably you need to refactor this because there's so much customization and it's so much, yeah, really so much customization that you basically need to rebuild it from scratch to have full control over it. You don't want
Yes.
to first load everything and then manipulate it dynamically client side. So you basically do the heavy lifting up front server side. So what's your
Kind of.
principle here?
I don't really use the old ASPX pages anymore.
Hmm.
So, um, first of all, I try to figure out what are the main 4 or 5 pages. Let's say you got an imprint, you got a profile page, you got a home page. You probably have another page, and I start with these. So, first of all, I create web templates. I
Okay.
don't use the standard ones. I most of the times create my own web templates with specific pre-written code in order to
Hmm.
visualize the content I need to visualize. Then I create the page template and then the web pages. So the portal is clickable. You can jump in between the pages. So you always see
Yeah.
something. You see the page title, the heading, you see some content, you have the footer, and you have the header. So there's something to visualize, something to work with. And I try to create a web template for every web page.
Hmm.
Sometimes I use web templates for a few web pages if the code is the same, if the structure is the same. But most of the times I create a web template for every page. It is a little bit more work, but the way you can handle the content is much more dynamic
Hmm.
because you can choose everywhere. Well, no, you can choose um, very easily how, um, how every page needs to look like.
And are you making use of of standard Bootstrap components, or are
Yes.
you do you prefer other libraries?
Uh, well, most of the times we start with the Bootstrap library and then we create a third or fourth custom CSS file
Hmm.
where we define specific containers, customer containers. Let's say we change the headline one font color or the
Yeah.
size. So we we fill this CSS web file with most of the client's corporate design.
Okay.
And then if we have some custom containers for specific visualization, we put them in there. Yes,
So you usually tend to use a global CSS file
yes,
and
yes,
enrich it and evolve it over time with each
yes,
page. Okay,
exactly. Yes.
I see.
Because once I manipulated the real Bootstrap file as well as the theme and the style file,
Hmm.
because I didn't know, because back in the days the documentation for these files weren't really available. So, well, at the end of the day, it didn't really work out because Microsoft pushed an update and,
Yeah.
well, the CSS didn't really work anymore. So this is one lesson learned. I always create in the very right beginning a custom CSS file
Okay,
where
cool.
everything goes in.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think that's best practice, and listeners who don't know if this is possible, yeah, you can have a
Yeah,
global CSS file and speak to it on every page that you like. You probably embed it as a web file under the homepage, maybe as a child, I don't know.
exactly.
Um, yeah, and how do you handle JavaScript? Do you put it individually on each web template, or do you also have a global JavaScript file?
I have a global JavaScript file as a web template,
Okay,
but
and then yeah.
only for validation whether a field should be a required or not required field, because I often use that template. These are the very first templates I implement. So if I'm on the basic form, I basically just cite via Liquid that web
Hmm.
template and call the function.
Hmm.
But most of, and to get back to your question, for every form, I use different jQueries besides the validation script.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. And yeah, from my experience, I sometimes step into projects which have not been successful, and
Hmm.
then I consult the client on, or maybe fix bugs. And I
Yes.
see that maybe the knowledge or the former developer was not up to speed, and then I see it in various places, but it's not really consistent. Yeah,
Yes.
they maybe have a global CSS file, but still within the web templates they have
Styles.
excessive inline and internal CSS. Yeah, and it's
Ah,
very hard to find your way through
yes.
what is the actual cause of the problem, because there can be so many places.
Yes.
So what
Exactly.
I also
Exactly.
learned as a best practice, maybe take some time in the beginning, and you do it maybe once or twice in your first two projects to really have your method of organizing these customizations, like
A
global
guideline,
CSS
basically.
file, global
Yes.
JavaScript file, or maybe some web template. It doesn't need to be files, could also be web templates that you call in each web template. It's
Exactly.
also, there are many ways to achieve the same goal, but be
Exactly.
consistent. Now that you got it all structured, what does your workbench look like? Your toolkit? What are you every day? What are you working in every day?
So I use three screens at the same time. I
Okay.
really like have an overview of all the things. Most of the times we work with Azure DevOps, so we got epics, we got features, we got PBIs as well as tasks,
Hmm.
and we I try to narrow every process into a couple of PBIs. Very simple but very structured.
All right. Okay.
Let's say you got the authentication process, the very first registration process. It ends when the user has led the profile. Then you got the profile itself. Let's say you need to force the user to save the profile once at least in order to use the portal's functionalities.
Hmm.
So you already have three or four PBIs. Very simple, but if you go one step by step, you have lots of documentation.
Hmm.
Maybe it's a little bit more work, but for our clients, which who tests everything, they can follow the implementation very easily and they
Yeah.
understand what the acceptance criteria are. Exactly. This is most of the time um, the case.
Hmm. And if you're then starting to develop your web templates and your JavaScript file and so on, what are the tools that you typically use? Are you using Visual Studio Code or something
Yes,
else?
I use most of the times Visual Studio Code,
Hmm.
sometimes Node++. I haven't used it for a while,
Okay.
uh, but for the last 6 months I use Visual Studio Code because it has an plugin
Yeah.
for Portal for Liquid. So you are able to start the liquid code, and it gives you options to choose from. It's very simple, very, very easy.
Nice, nice. So have you been using the Power Platform CLI?
I've done it a few times, but to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan
Okay.
yet because I'm used to work with the portal management app where I can copy paste the code, clear the cache,
Yeah.
and refresh the web page where I'm on and look at the my work. I haven't probably you can ask me the question in 1 or 2 years, and I would say I'm using Visual Studio every day. Um, well, old habits don't really
Sure.
die, do they?
Exactly, exactly. And did you sometimes find yourself using the latest Portal Studio? You know, like the the
Yes.
front-facing editor.
Um, it makes it look too easy.
Yeah.
And for creating a mockup, very simple, very fast, a few pages with some content and some buttons and iframes and some images, it's a very good start. However, it has its limits. It often tells you, well, from here on now, you need to use the Power Management app again and the Portal Management app again. So I don't really use it currently. I use it for website visibility. I use it for checking the portal for some problems. But customizing the portal, not really, not really.
Not really. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Okay,
But
cool.
it could change, of course, it could change in
Yeah,
the
I
future.
mean, the product matures, I don't know, weekly. I would say. I mean, there are new content types popping up now and then. You know,
Yes,
the options that you have to add new content. So it's interesting. It's interesting. Okay,
yes.
cool. Great stuff.
It
Great
is.
stuff. So once you've got it all in place now, how do you test?
In the development, I give the task to one of my colleagues to test it. So this is the very, well, of course, I test what I've developed or what we have developed. And in the second phase, I ask somebody else to test it in order to get a feeling whether it works, whether the user is in a specific flow and process based on the acceptance criteria, of course. And then in a third, um, and we document that test. We make screenshots sometimes, we written down what happens, and we save that file just for documentation. Of course, it takes more time, but we have tested a user story, you have a documentation, you know what kind of user it was, which web role, which byte. We often even ask for the browser version because sometimes you have an update on your browser, it doesn't look the same anymore. And then when we have done the test, we give it to our client and ask them whether that works. And sometimes it's just perfect, it works, and sometimes you need to change something, the color for a button, or something is not clear, or maybe there's a spelling error. That could happen. But
Sure,
I
sure.
often try to make it waterproof before I hand it over.
Cool, cool. Have you ever had the chance to work with automated testing?
Not yet.
Not
Not
yet.
not in Power Pages. I don't even know whether there are automated tests. Are they?
I think it's a common discipline to test web apps, yeah, which is very UI driven and interaction driven. There are tools out there. I think the one that is currently promoted by Microsoft, or let's say suggested by Microsoft, is Playwright. I think it's called
Playwright.
Playwright, yeah. Um,
Never heard.
but I have personally have not used it, and well, and that's because I didn't find a customer who pays for it, yeah. But I would, in theory, I see a lot of value in automated testing,
Yes.
which can run at night to tell you in the morning. Don't worry, everything's fine. No bugs found. Nope. Well,
That's
probably
not gonna
not.
happen.
But
That's not gonna happen.
yeah, yeah. But that's something I think that doesn't receive much attention, maybe none, but could
Yes.
also deliver a lot of value in big
Yeah,
projects, especially.
probably.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so stuff is now designed, stuff is implemented, stuff is
Yes.
tested. How do you deploy to the next system? If you have a next system, because I would assume you don't develop in production, do you?
Not at all, please. No, 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 no. In the very beginning, we make test and prod not editable at all.
Okay.
We only make development. And um, when I work with my colleagues in the portal, in the Power Pages, I'm very specific in uh, creating bookmarks. You got a folder for dev, you got a folder for test, you got a folder for prod.
Hmm.
You choose specific colors for dev, test, and prod. And you
Absolutely.
announce them at the very beginning because you don't want to mess around on test or prod. You only want to do it in dev. So you make sure that everybody only knows dev and how to access it.
Yeah. I feel there are different type of deployments out in the wild. You have the big deployments for release where you basically say, okay, everything is tested. I now want to
Yes,
move everything to another instance. But
yes,
let's say you're in the middle of a sprint, you develop something in dev, and you just want to push this little change out to test to hand it over for a first test. Then I usually take the XRM toolbox, the Portal Records Mover, and
yes.
just switch things over. Very specific
Mm,
in detail, and not the complete portal.
well, I get your point. I wouldn't do it.
Okay, why not?
I've tried to. No, no, no. I don't want to go down that road. Not at
Okay,
all. Uh, I just want to make it clean and simple
okay,
because
clean
if you
cuts.
move data in between and something happens and you have a partial rollback, which I don't really like.
Mm,
So, I mean, we are not doctors. We're not here to save the world. We
mm,
work in IT. We develop products, applications. And if there's not the biggest incident which we need to fix right now, let's say a hot fix,
mm,
we have specific rules by saying we have a deployment every week, every day, or
mm,
every 2 weeks once the sprint is finished. Everything
mm.
is safe and sound, it's tested. No, we move on.
Yeah,
Moving data in between,
yeah.
well,
Okay, I
you
I
can do it.
I
Come
get your
on,
point.
go for it.
It can have negative effects if you don't pay
Yes,
attention, absolutely. And I think it's fair. It's also a fair hygiene in the project to say, um, you know, we build every day. You can expect the next update tomorrow. So
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
it maybe also it also sets some boundaries, in terms of reaction times. Yeah, if your
Exactly.
customer
Yes.
says, I've got a problem at 9 a.m., I have a meeting at 11, please fix this, or please put this at highest priority so I can show it to my internal stakeholders. You
Yes.
avoid those conversations if you say, well, I can totally work on this today and we can reprioritize, but you can expect it tomorrow. So because I don't want to mess around with my deployment strategy.
Exactly. And these are one of the things I try to explain to our client in the very beginning when we start the projects. We define the time frame for a sprint. We define the deployment.
Hmm.
You only need to consider you are the director, or we are the directors,
Sure.
like in the movie. We need to gain our client's trust. But the only way to do it is to give him some boundaries, some rules, and make it very understandable.
Hmm.
If you tell him we don't deploy in between, we only deploy, let's say, every night, every week, whatever time frame you choose, and you tell them why, the reasons behind, they will understand it and they will follow it. And even then you reduce the requests of, could we have 3 changes a day? If you
Yeah.
have specific rules based on experience and explain that to the client, of course you can have exceptions. Yes, don't get me wrong, but if if you lay out specific rules, specific guidelines, basically, don't not guidelines, you often get some acceptance for that.
Yeah.
That makes it much more easier.
Sure. I totally get your point, and I really like the idea of having like the the lowest time frame, the smallest time frame to expect new features is on a daily
Yes,
basis, and you don't even need to touch anything. It's just done automatically via
exactly,
a pipeline deployment. So yeah,
exactly. And we often do
that's
it via night, at night, let's say
yeah.
11 p.m. So sometimes you work in the evening, sometimes. So you are pretty sure when you closed or when you
Yeah.
shut down the computer that everything is on test on the next day.
Plus, it's documented, right? It's automatically
Ex
put into the repo. Don't worry
exactly,
about that. You've done a
exactly,
changes 3 day you've done a change, and 3 days later you end up in a dead end. Well, no problem. Look into the repo 3 days ago and take your web template source code and start all over again. No problem.
exactly, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. Right. Wow. So I see you're not a novice in this, yeah? You've done some projects because you do have methods, and
Yes.
you have you have those principles in place. Nice. Cool.
Yeah.
So, um yeah, what else is there to say? So what I when I talk to people who also work with Power Pages or portals itself, I like to ask those questions like, what would you like to see coming up as standard features? What are you currently
Oh,
missing which would help your daily life?
okay. Um, the very first thing is I would like to extend the possibility of the metadata.
Okay, to what
I would
respect?
like to have dynamic required fields, so I don't need
Yeah.
to write so much jQuery JavaScript.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it shouldn't be that difficult to say when basically you translate business rules from the CRM into the portal.
Yeah,
That's
make
basically
them
what it is.
available. Exactly.
Yes,
I think the only supported business rule type is error message
yes,
that is supported. The rest is not translated down
yes,
to the Power Pages framework. Exactly. Yeah. Make business rules completely
yes.
supported by the framework. That would help.
And what I would like to see is a Power Pages catalog for regular expressions. I
Okay.
often use regular expressions for phone numbers
Yeah.
or email address. It's very simple. You create your code, put it in, and it works. But I sometimes have the notion that it's not really supported. So I would like to see Microsoft giving out a specific library for these regular expressions to make it very easy to understand what and where to use. Of course, there are configurations to create your regular expressions.
Sure.
And there are even templates, yes, but I would feel more safe if Microsoft would have just only one page by saying, here's your metadata, here's your regular expressions. By the way, here's a configurator. You type in, let's say via ChatGTP, what you want, and it gives you the
Yeah.
right answer. That would be something.
Yeah. Why not? Cool. I really, really like that idea. I haven't thought of that, to actually leverage AI to do this. Yeah. And if it's natively built into the product, into our tools that we use every day. Yeah, absolutely. I see big value in here. Nice.
What else? In the beginning of a project, we just talked about that I often recreate the profile page in order to use metadata, in order to choose where to lead the portal user after saving the profile. So I basically throw away the standard profile page and create a custom profile page via basic form. So the freedom of developing is much more greater. And all the JavaScript behind the template of the profile page, I would like to see it somewhere, because I have copied that code, adjusted for our clients, but it would be nice having a small documentation from Microsoft by saying, if you don't use the custom, the standard profile page, if you like to use the custom profile page, these are the steps to follow. These are the things to consider. Let's say, first of all, create a basic form, and make sure to use the profile web form in the solution. Because if you change the name of the profile web form in the solution, or even if you use the German word for it, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, it's hardwired into the code behind. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. So that would be something.
Yeah.
That would be something. So what else? Maybe make it much more easier to use web APIs.
Okay.
If you use a web API, you probably need some jQuery JavaScript in order to exactly get the information you need, the records you want. I sometimes even use fetch.xml for the same in the same way, but using a web API with less code would be a little bit easier, would be a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know how, but you asked me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got a proper answer.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I must stress this. I specifically like the idea of having more visual editors for dynamic content. Yeah, to the very first point. So
Yes.
I would think especially for low code makers that would give huge benefits, just like it's in the Power Platform.
Business words.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Nice. Okay, Konstantin.
Is that already the end? No, really.
Do you have something to share? Some wisdom that we have not
Some
talked about
wisdom.
yet?
Some wisdom.
I mean, you have shared plenty now. So,
Don't use it against me. Well, the wisdom is, if you implement Power Pages for your customer, try to think about the few principles I said. See it as a second user interface for the Dataverse. Make the data visible. Don't show too much data. Reduce the data shown to the user. Figure out the permissions, the web roles for the users. And always keep in mind, you are creating an assistant for choices and to create value, basically.
yeah. Yeah. Good thoughts, good advice. Wish I've heard something like this in the beginning. So,
I have the notion that it's not the last call, isn't it?
I hope so. I hope so. Cool. Okay, Konstantin, let's wrap things up. Thank you so much for being on this show. It was my pleasure to look into your toolkit, your methods, your knowledge, wisdom, battle scars. And I hope that the listeners, also had the chance to take something out of this call or
Yes,
out of the
that
show.
would be something. Yes.
Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing this.
Thank you, Tino, for the invitation. Thank you for the talk, and thank God not being the only one working with Power Pages. At least there are a few people working with it. It makes it much more easier.
You're not alone. And now you know someone to call if you're in complete despair.
Trust me, you will block my number by the day after tomorrow.
All right. We'll see about that. Cool.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for listening to Conversations. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did recording it. Consider subscribing so you're not missing out on the next episode. Take care.